Hello, everyone. Welcome to Spartan News, and I am the Spartan. First of all, just to tell you a little bit about myself. From a career perspective, I spent some time in the military when I was younger. I was also a forest firefighter, and the majority of my career after that has been spent in the financial sector. I'm a passionate supporter of Ukraine and their struggle against Russia, and I've always admired Ukraine YouTubers and content creators. And I've had an itch to do the same for many months myself. So here we go. This is my first ever video, and this updated Russian war loss chart is my first ever content creation, and hopefully not my last. My goals are create and share enough valuable content to gain at least 1,000 followers or subscribers, which will allow me to monetize this channel. Found that out that you need 1,000 before you can earn super chats or memberships or anything like that. Next, I'd love to become a full-time YouTube content creator and an interactive media representative. And after that, I'd love to have enough support to be able to directly help people in Ukraine if possible. Why did I take on this project? The main reason is there's a ton of information and updates on daily Russian losses, both men and machines. And separately, I've heard many figures and estimates of what it costs to outfit a soldier to the cost of repairing or replacing a sunken ship. I thought it would be nice to see both tangible losses and the associated dollar figure in one chart in one place. What I've compiled needs to be taken with a grain of salt and a skeptical mind. The total amount of men and equipment that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense updates each day is indicative, but should not be considered accurate to a T, of course. Oryx updates losses of what can be visually verified. That's the low end, that's the low bar. This chart from the MOD is what should be considered the high end of the possibilities of what's been lost. The actual losses most likely fall somewhere in between the two. In addition, when I attempted to calculate the total dollar impacts of each of these losses, each of these categories, I had to make assumptions on a variety of factors, such as when an unverified loss was added to a category, which piece of equipment was it? What was the most common type of equipment in country or in that area at the time? Will that piece of equipment be replaced by the Russians? If so, when? And by what? Something older and less capable, like a T-54, something similar in age and capabilities, or something newer. Um, some high-end items like ships or portions of S-3, S-400 batteries were claimed to be sunk or destroyed by the Ukrainians, whereas the Russians claim either no damage or the damage that did take place was easily repairable. So 100 people could compile these dollar figures and come up with 100 different totals. Like the actual losses stated by the MOD, I hope my dollars lost estimates are merely indicative and spark some conversation. So let's review what I put together, starting with troop losses. So as you can see, right now, the current troop losses for the Russians is 207,910. Um, Now, obviously, every life is valuable, every life is priceless. So this dollar figure that you're seeing of $2.077 billion is not reflective of the value of their life. It is the value of what I have estimated to be what it costs to equip and train each one of those soldiers that was lost. Now, how to break down 207,910 estimated losses when not all are verified. This took a fair amount of digging, and it will not be 100% accurate. But what I did find roughly to be around 311 of those losses were pilots. Um, and even there, is it two people in a particular plane, two in a helicopter? Was the helicopter being flown by a solo pilot? We don't know. What I was able to find some information is on the training costs of, for example, a 14-year Air Force jet fighter pilot was around $14 million. It was less for a what you'd call a tenured and experienced, say, alligator helicopter pilot, but still a substantial cost to train and get years of experience under the belts of what are considered extremely hard to replace individuals, which are jet fighter and helicopter pilots. Um, so that was 0.0015%. 5% roughly, and again, grain of salt, 5% roughly of the losses would be considered senior officers. Um, those particular officers took what was to be estimated as $60,000 in additional training over the years from when they first entered the officer corps until they became what we'd consider a tenured officer. Below there, roughly 15% of people of the troops lost would be considered in the lieutenant corps um, or something comparable. And that was an additional around $10,000 per person. And then in the pre-war estimates, converted to US dollars using 2017 figures, which was the last ones that I could really find. It's approximately $2,500 to equip the typical Russian soldier, and approximately $2,500 to properly train that that conscript or that soldier. Now, as we know, a large amount of tenured officers were lost at the start of the war and continuing to be lost throughout the war. And they were, we've heard story after story after story of them being replaced by prisoners, conscripts, Mobics, people showing up with mismatched uniforms, no uniforms at all, no protective gear, no weapons or rusty weapons, etc. So are the Russians spending $5,000 on every single new recruit that is sent out to the front line? Probably not. So that estimate can be considered possibly high. However, that's one of the leaps of faith I took to say, okay, so it's not about replacing that person now, because you're probably not going to be able to replace them now. But if the Russians were to replace that person over time properly and get their military back up to speed, what would be the cost impact um, to them? So, roughly, when you look at everything from pilots all the way down to your brand new conscripts, you're looking at around $9,992.50 per soldier. So that kind of shows you the logic that has gone into that. Now, as we move on to APVs, etc., I just wanted to mention a couple of things. First of all, I do know after doing a little bit of editing there that the audio does not sound the greatest. I'm not using high-end YouTuber microphones or setups yet. So apologize for the tinny nature of the audio, but as I go down this path and take things a little more seriously, professionally, etc., I'll look to be upgrading my audio setup so that it's a lot more pleasing to the ears for you guys. Um, so I won't go into as much detail with all the rest of the categories, but just to let you know some of the thinking that went into the logic behind the dollar values that, excuse me, ended up coming out on the other side. APVs, for example, you've got a wide range of potential vehicles, many of which, as I mentioned before, and as we all know, just get lumped in as an APV destroyed, and you don't know if it's a $70,000 Tiger HMMV or is it a top of the line BMP T3, upwards of $3 million. So, looking at the percentages of each vehicle type, what we typically have seen destroyed, new slash old BMPs being brought out of storage to replace some of the better higher end stuff that's been destroyed, etc. So the average that I landed on for for BMPs, or sorry, APVs was $1.2 million. Again, feel free to tackle that, pick it apart. I do plan on going through, Oryx's detailed um, listing of each and every tank, APV, MLRS, et cetera, that was destroyed. And then potentially looking at trying to get a dollar value for that and then grossing that up to the higher number of losses that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense is claiming. That'll be a lot of work. And again, no guarantee that it's accurate because what Oryx sees and what has been destroyed out of sight doesn't automatically translate apples to apples, but might be something interesting to tackle to see how it turns out. um, so the next one is vehicles and fuel tanks. Um, Again, very difficult to tell what exactly was destroyed at all times. Landed on 140,000 for that. Tanks range from um, T54s all the way up to T90Ms. The average price that I landed on for tanks was 2.5 mil, etc. um, Artillery, you've got everything from heavy mortars at 800,000 all the way up to a TOS at 28 million. Um, what do we have next? Artillery, or sorry, drones, UAVs, everything from a Mavic to an Orleans. So it can range from thousands to tens of thousands. Average was 22,000 for that. Same thing with the MLRS. You have a toss to a BM30 to BM21. Average there was 5.5 mil. Cruise missiles landed on an average of 980,000. And what I didn't average in was the seven Kinzhals because of the fact that they're so dramatically more expensive than your typical cruise missile. So what I basically did was I subtracted the seven total Kinzhals from the total cruise missiles that were destroyed. Used the 980,000 um, price tag for the remainers, and then added in 70 million for the Kinzhal. So that's how I came up with that one. So a little manual intervention as opposed to just a straight average. Anti-aircraft systems, you've got anything from a Pantsir 16 million up to 400 million for an S400. That's an S400. It's a total complex of radar, control vehicle, multiple launchers, multiple missiles, etc. So obviously, just like when the Russians claim that they've taken out a Patriot, when the Ukrainians take out an S-400 or S-300, doesn't mean they've taken out every single rocket and every component, but they've done some serious damage. Um, so that again takes a little bit of manual intervention to basically get those ones correct. Um, and I believe I landed on 3.75 million, if I'm correct. Um, no, 37.5 million for the anti-aircraft warfare systems. Special equipment, so varied, so very varied, very varied. From radar to bridge builders to command trucks to mine clearing units. The what we tend to see fall into the special equipment bucket tends to be on the higher end specialized. It can be a command and control vehicle. It can be a specialized EW, electronic jamming facility, truck, etc. It could be a higher end bridge building, you know, truck, if you want to call it that, piece of bridge building equipment, etc. But they don't tend to be the $50,000, $60,000 things that we're talking about here. It tends to be higher end and very specialized mine clearing. So ended up with 2.5 million per unit on that one. Boats was interesting. There was the Raptor class. Five of them were destroyed fairly early on in the war, so they were 3 million each. 750 million was the US dollar replacement cost for the Moskva. So that's the big ticket item. And then there was other boats that have claimed to have been sunk or damaged with no known verification. Um, it was really hard to tell. They tended to be on the smaller side. One larger boat was claimed to have been sunk by the Ukrainians, but it was never verified. And we do know that some of the smaller riverine type boats were destroyed as well by the Ukrainians. So for the 11 for sure unknowns, I attached $1 million to each one of those, plus the 18 million for the Raptors and the 750 million for the Moskva, and that's where we came up with that total. And then one Kerch Bridge so far. So very hard to tell. Obviously, the Russians aren't broadcasting how much damage was done, how much it cost to repair it. But given the extensive amount of time that it took to repair, given the number of road sections that were taken out, and the substantial damage to rail the rail section that was basically solid steel but warped so badly that it had to be taken out and replaced. I basically associated, due to materials, cost, time, etc., 10% of the original cost to build the Kerch Bridge as the total repair costs. It might be overshooting, it might not be, but I gave that, it was a $3.7 billion build originally, so I gave it a $370 million price tag to get it fully repaired and operational again. So again, that's a bit of the logic that's gone into everything. Um, I'll continue to update this total daily, refine it. If anybody has any feedback, you want to punch holes in the logic, or just congratulate me on being a nerd, whatever, I'd appreciate to hear from you. Please like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends. I could use these subscribers. I'd like to get to chugging towards that 1,000 and get monetized. Um, and uh, and yeah, if it makes you feel better, just look at that total at the bottom of the chart, and you can see it's a probably safely cost the Russians at least 62 plus $billion, approaching $63 billion in material and training and equipment, etc. And it's nowhere close to done. So you can just imagine what the end total is going to be, and I'll happily keep track of it. So again, thank you for your time. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll be in touch in the near future. Everyone, have a great night.